All right, let's talk about something that can really ruin your day, that dreaded check engine light. Today, we are going to tackle a specific one, the P0746 code. Now, I know it sounds super technical, but trust me, we're going to break it all down step by step so you know exactly what your car is trying to tell you.
You know that feeling, right? You're just driving along, minding your own business, and then boom! That little orange light pops on and your heart just sinks a little. You get it scanned and it spits out P0746. Your mind immediately goes to the worst case scenario. But hey, don't panic just yet. We're going to walk through this logically. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll figure out what this code actually means. Then, we'll start with the simplest, most common fix, your transmission fluid, before we even think about the more complicated stuff. By the end of this, you're going to have a crystal clear action plan.
So, first things first. What is this P0746 code all about? Let's decode this thing and get to the bottom of what's happening inside your transmission.
Okay, at its very core, P0746 is telling you there's a problem with something called the pressure control solenoid A. Just think of your automatic transmission as this complex hydraulic system. This solenoid is basically an electronic valve that the car's computer uses to control fluid pressure. That pressure is what makes it shift gears. The computer, or TCM, has noticed that the pressure just isn't right. It's either not performing like it should, or it's just plain stuck.
So how does a weird code like that translate into what you actually feel when you're driving? Well, obviously the check engine light is on, but you might also feel the car shifting really hard, or maybe it seems to hesitate before it changes gears. In more serious cases, your car might go into what's called limp mode, where it gets stuck in one gear, usually second or third, just to protect itself. You might also notice the engine revs up high between shifts, almost like the gears aren't catching right away.
Now, before you start pricing out new solenoids or calling every mechanic in town, let's pump the brakes. We need to start with the single most common cause, which is also, thankfully, the cheapest thing to check, your transmission fluid.
This is why the fluid is so critical. Remember that P0746 code is all about pressure. So if your fluid is low, the system just physically can't build up the pressure it needs to work properly. On the other hand, if the fluid is old, burnt, and full of gunk, well, all that sludge can literally clog up the solenoid and cause it to stick. See what's happening? Two different fluid problems, one identical P0746 code.
So here's your very first mission, and it's an easy one. Pop the hood, find the transmission fluid dipstick. Your owner's manual will show you exactly where it is, and check the level. But don't stop there. Wipe the dipstick on a clean paper towel and really look at the fluid. Healthy fluid is usually a nice, bright, translucent red. If what you see is dark brown or black, or if it has a burnt toast smell, that's a huge red flag that there might be bigger problems inside.
Now, here's a really important, kind of counterintuitive piece of advice. Let's say you have a car with a ton of miles and you suspect the transmission fluid has never been changed. Be careful. Sometimes all that old, thick, sludgy fluid is actually creating enough friction to help the worn-out clutch's grip. If you suddenly flush all that out and put in fresh, clean, slippery fluid, you might find that the transmission starts slipping like crazy. It's a weird situation, but it's something to be really mindful of.
Okay, so what if your fluid level is perfect and the condition looks great? Well, that's good news and bad news. The good news is it's not a simple fix. The next logical place to look is the solenoid itself and all the wiring that goes with it.
Let's just quickly recap what this thing does. The solenoid is basically the middleman between your car's computer and the actual mechanical parts. The computer sends a little electrical pulse. The solenoid opens or closes a tiny valve, and that action directs the flow of high-pressure fluid to make the shift happen. It's a tiny little part that does a massive job.
So how can this system fail? Well, a few ways. The solenoid itself can just die. The coil inside can burn out, or the little plunger can get physically stuck. But, and this is a big but, it's not always the part itself. The wiring that runs to the solenoid lives in a really tough neighborhood with lots of heat and vibration. Wires can get brittle and crack, connectors can corrode, you can get a short circuit. That's why, before you replace the part, you've got to check the wiring and test the solenoid's electrical resistance with a multimeter.
All right, we've gone through the most common culprits. But what if the fluid is good, the wiring looks fine, and the solenoid tests out okay? Well, this is where we have to start thinking about more serious internal transmission issues. And honestly, this is probably the point where it's time to call in a professional.
Yeah, these are the fixes we all hope it isn't.
You could have tiny metal shavings from normal wear and tear that have clogged up the small passages inside the valve body. That's kind of like the transmission's hydraulic brain. Or the valve body itself could be warped or damaged. In really rare cases, the computer itself, the TCM, can go bad. And, of course, the code could be a symptom of a major internal failure, like a clutch pack that's completely worn out.
Okay, I know that was a ton of information, so let's tie it all together. How do you go from seeing that scary check engine light to actually getting a fix? We need a clear, simple roadmap to follow.
Here it is, your 4-step action plan. Number 1, and I'm going to say it again, always start with the fluid. Check the level and condition. It is by far the most likely cause. Number 2, get a flashlight and inspect the wiring and connectors for any obvious damage. Number 3, if you're comfortable using one, test the solenoid with a multimeter. And finally, step 4, if all the basics check out and you still have the code, it's time to let a trusted mechanic take a deeper look.
So as we wrap this up, I'll just leave you with this thought. That P0746 code can feel really intimidating, for sure. But by following a logical process and by starting with the simplest things first, you might just find your fix. So could a few bucks worth of transmission fluid really save you from a multi-$1,000 repair bill? You bet it could.